Most people think nighttime is peaceful because the world finally becomes quiet. But for some people, silence is not peace. Silence is exposure. During the day, life protects you from yourself. Notifications, conversations, work, responsibilities, traffic, noise, routines, they all act like distractions strong enough to keep certain emotions locked away. But late at night, when the lights are off and nobody needs anything from you anymore, your mind finally removes the mask you wore all day. And that is when the real conversations begin. There is something strangely honest about 2 a.m. Not dramatic honesty, not movie scene honesty. Real honesty. The kind where you suddenly remember a sentence someone told you 5 years ago that still hurts for no reason you can explain. The kind where you replay moments you thought you had moved on from. The kind where your chest feels heavy even though nothing bad is happening in the moment. Your room is quiet. Your phone is beside you. Maybe the fan is spinning above your head. Maybe rain is hitting the window softly. Everything outside looks calm, but inside your mind, there are hundreds of unfinished conversations walking in circles. Late night thoughts are different from daytime thoughts because they are less filtered. During the day, the brain is busy surviving. At night, it starts processing. That is why people suddenly miss someone they were fine without all day. That is why regrets become louder after midnight. That is why insecurities feel more convincing in darkness. The human mind was never designed to carry this much emotional weight without release. But most people do exactly that. They spend years suppressing emotions because survival seems more important than understanding themselves. They laugh when they are uncomfortable. They say I'm okay because explaining the truth feels exhausting. They stay distracted because slowing down means feeling everything they avoided. And eventually, all those unspoken emotions wait for one specific moment to return. Nighttime. Because nighttime removes witnesses. And people are most honest when nobody is watching. Some people become philosophers at night. Some become overthinkers. Some become children again. Suddenly, a grown adult lying in bed starts feeling the same loneliness they felt at 13. The same fear of rejection. The same confusion about whether they are enough for anyone. Because deep emotional wounds do not disappear with age. They simply become quieter during the daytime. At night, they speak again. And the dangerous part is that tiredness changes perception. Psychology has shown that emotional regulation becomes weaker when people are sleep-deprived or mentally exhausted. That means thoughts feel heavier at night than they actually are. Problems appear larger. Memories become more emotional. The brain starts connecting unrelated fears together until one small insecurity suddenly feels like proof that your entire life is falling apart. A person who felt productive at 3 p.m. can feel like a complete failure at 2 a.m. Not because reality changed, because exhaustion changed the way reality feels. That is why late-night thoughts are often emotional, not logical, but they still feel real. And feelings are powerful because the body reacts to them as if they are facts. You can know someone loves you and still feel abandoned at night. You can know you are improving and still feel behind everyone else. You can know the past is over and still relive it emotionally. This is why nighttime becomes addictive for certain people. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because nighttime is the only moment they stop running from themselves. During the day, they perform. At night, they confront. And sometimes the confrontation becomes unbearable. There are people who stay awake longer than necessary because sleeping means ending the distraction. So they scroll endlessly through social media, hoping exhaustion will knock them, unconscious before their thoughts get too loud. But eventually the phone battery dies, the room becomes silent again, and there they are alone with every memory they tried to outrun. People rarely admit how emotionally vulnerable they become after midnight. That is why some of the deepest confessions happen late at night. The I miss you texts, the random apologies, the emotional voice notes, the sudden honesty. Darkness makes people feel less visible, and when people feel less visible, they become less guarded. But late-night thoughts are not only about sadness. Sometimes they reveal truths we ignore during the day. Sometimes nighttime exposes how unhappy someone actually is. A person can spend years convincing themselves they are satisfied with their life until one random night when they stare at the ceiling and realize they have not truly felt alive in a long time. That realization does not usually happen in crowded rooms. It happens in silence. There are people living lives they secretly hate, but they only admit it to themselves at night. There are people in relationships that emotionally ended months ago, but nighttime forces them to feel the distance they ignored during the day. There are people chasing goals they never even wanted, and the exhaustion of nighttime strips away the fake motivation they perform publicly. Because nighttime does not care about appearances, it only cares about truth, and truth is uncomfortable, especially for people who built their identity around being fine. The strongest looking people often suffer the loudest late night thoughts because they spend all day suppressing vulnerability. Everyone depends on them. Everyone sees them as stable. So they become experts at hiding emotional exhaustion. But emotions do not disappear simply because they are hidden. The mind keeps records of everything. Every disappointment. Every humiliation. Every moment someone felt unloved but pretended not to care. The body remembers. The nervous system remembers. And nighttime remembers. Some people are not haunted by ghosts from the past. They are haunted by versions of themselves they abandoned in order to survive. The sensitive version, the hopeful version, the creative version, the trusting version. Late at night, they suddenly think about who they could have been if life had not hurt them so much. And that thought quietly breaks their heart. Because one of the saddest human experiences is realizing you slowly became someone you never intended to become. Not evil, not dramatic, just emotionally tired, cautious, disconnected, unable to trust people the way you once did. Late night thoughts often expose emotional grief that has nothing to do with death. People grieve old friendships, old dreams, old personalities, old years of their lives. Sometimes a person is not crying because they miss someone. They are crying because they miss who they were before that person hurt them. And the hardest part about emotional pain is that life still expects performance while you carry it. Bills still exist. Responsibilities continue. People still expect replies. So most individuals learn how to function while emotionally exhausted. They wake up, smile, work, joke around, act normal. But deep down they are surviving on emotional autopilot. Then nighttime arrives, and the performance ends. That is why some people suddenly feel empty for no visible reason. Because numbness during the day often transforms into sadness at night. Suppressed emotions always return somehow. The mind demands acknowledgement eventually. But here is the part most people misunderstand about late night thoughts. Not every thought deserves belief. Just because your mind says something in darkness does not automatically make it true. The brain is deeply influenced by emotional state. Fear creates distorted conclusions. Loneliness creates false narratives. Exhaustion creates hopelessness. And overthinking turns possibilities into imagined certainties. A person can convince themselves nobody cares about them while ignoring years of love they received. A person can relive one embarrassing moment repeatedly while forgetting hundreds of meaningful experiences. The mind has a negativity bias. It naturally focuses on emotional threats because human survival depended on noticing danger more than comfort. At night, when external stimulation decreases, unresolved emotional threats become more noticeable. That is why overthinkers suffer so intensely. Their brains are constantly trying to solve emotional uncertainty. What if they secretly hate me? What if I wasted my life? What if I never become enough? What if nobody truly understands me? And because these questions rarely have absolute answers, the brain keeps looping endlessly looking for certainty that does not exist. Sometimes the real problem is not pain. It is resistance to pain. People desperately try to fix every uncomfortable feeling immediately instead of understanding it. But emotions are signals, not enemies. Sadness often reveals emotional neglect. Anxiety reveals fear of uncertainty. Loneliness reveals disconnection. Regret reveals unresolved meaning. Nighttime thoughts become destructive when people listen without awareness. But they can become transformative when people listen with honesty. Because sometimes your late night mind is not attacking you. Sometimes it is trying to tell you something your daytime self keeps ignoring. Maybe you are exhausted from pretending. Maybe you are giving too much to people who emotionally drain you. Maybe you are living according to survival instead of fulfillment. Maybe your body is tired because your soul has been carrying unresolved pain for years. People think healing is dramatic. In reality, healing often begins with uncomfortable awareness. A quiet moment where someone finally admits, I am not okay with the life I'm living. Or, I never truly recovered from what happened. Or even, don't know who I am anymore. Those moments feel terrifying because honesty destroys illusions. but illusions are expensive. The longer people lie to themselves emotionally, the heavier their nights become. And this is why some people fear sleep, not because of nightmares, because lying still forces them to meet themselves. There are nights when people suddenly remember every mistake they ever made, every opportunity lost, every person they disappointed. Shame becomes loud in darkness because shame feeds on isolation. The brain starts building a false identity out of painful moments. You always ruin things. You are impossible to love. You will never change. But human beings are more complicated than their worst moments. One mistake is not an identity. One heartbreak is not a destiny. One painful season is not an entire life story. Yet nighttime convinces people that permanence exists in emotions. That is why so many individuals silently suffer while appearing normal externally. They are fighting internal battles nobody can see. And often, the people who check on others the most are the ones drowning privately at night, because they understand pain deeply. People who feel deeply usually become emotionally observant. They notice changes in voices, energy shifts, forced smiles, hidden sadness. But the tragedy is that emotionally aware people sometimes struggle to express their own pain because they became too good at carrying it quietly. So they become listeners for everyone else while slowly collapsing internally. And nighttime exposes that exhaustion. The truth is, many people are not tired because they work too hard physically. They are tired because their minds never rest. Constant worrying, constant self-comparison, constant emotional suppression, constant pressure to become more. Modern life has created a generation of mentally overstimulated but emotionally disconnected people. Everyone is online. Everyone is visible. Everyone is comparing their behind-the-scenes pain to someone else's highlight reel. So nighttime becomes the only place where authenticity returns. No filters, no performances, no distractions strong enough to hide reality completely. And reality can feel brutal when someone spent years avoiding themselves. But there is another truth about late-night thoughts that people rarely talk about. Sometimes the pain is not trying to destroy you. Sometimes it is trying to redirect you. Human beings often change only after. Emotional discomfort becomes impossible to ignore. People leave toxic environments when staying hurts more than leaving. People begin healing when denial becomes exhausting. People rediscover themselves after emotional breakdowns force self-reflection. Pain is not always punishment. Sometimes pain is an interruption, a forced pause, a signal that something inside needs attention. And maybe that is why certain nights stay in our memory forever. Nights where something quietly shifted inside us. Nights where we realized we could not continue living the same way emotionally. Nights where we finally understood ourselves differently. Because transformation rarely happens loudly. It happens in silence. In bedrooms, in car rides, in sleepless nights where someone stares into darkness, questioning everything. The world often romanticizes productivity, confidence, and success. But some of the most important human moments happen invisibly. Moments where a person decides to forgive themselves. Moments where someone chooses to stay alive despite emotional exhaustion. Moments where somebody finally admits they deserve better than the pain they normalized. Those victories are quiet, but they matter. Late-night thoughts can destroy people who believe every fearful emotion immediately. But they can also awaken people who are finally willing to listen honestly to themselves. The key is learning the difference between emotional truth and emotional distortion. Not every fear is wisdom. Not every insecurity is reality. Not every lonely feeling means you are unloved. And not every painful night means your life is hopeless. Sometimes you are simply exhausted. Sometimes your nervous system needs rest. Sometimes your inner child is asking for compassion instead of criticism. Sometimes your mind is overloaded from carrying emotions you never expressed properly. And sometimes you just need time. People underestimate the psychological importance of self-compassion. Many individuals speak to themselves with a level of cruelty they would never use toward another human being. Especially at night. The inner dialogue becomes merciless. You're behind. You failed. You're weak. But shame rarely creates healthy transformation. Understanding does. Healing begins when people stop treating themselves like enemies for having human emotions. Because being emotionally affected does not make someone weak. Missing people is human. Feeling lost is human. Crying unexpectedly at night is human. Questioning your life sometimes is human. The problem is not emotion itself. The problem is isolation within emotion. And sadly, millions of people suffer silently because they believe nobody else feels the same darkness they feel at night. But if human beings were truly honest, they would realize how similar their hidden struggles actually are. Almost everyone has nights where they doubt themselves. Almost everyone has memories that still hurt unexpectedly. Almost everyone has moments where they feel emotionally exhausted pretending to be okay. The difference is that some people learn to face those thoughts with awareness instead of surrendering to them blindly. Because thoughts are not commands, emotions are not permanent, and dark nights do not last forever. Morning eventually arrives even after the longest night. That sounds simple, but psychologically, it matters. Human emotions are temporary states. Even when they feel endless, the brain changes constantly. Pain changes constantly. People change constantly. The version of you suffering tonight is not necessarily the version of you that will exist 1 year from now. And that matters more than people realize. Some individuals survive periods they once believed would destroy them completely. Not because they suddenly became fearless, but because human beings are more adaptable than they think. The mind heals slowly. The heart softens slowly, meaning returns slowly. But slowly does not mean never. And maybe that is the final truth about late night thoughts. They reveal both the fragility and resilience of being human. They show us our fears, regrets, loneliness, and hidden wounds. But they also show our longing for meaning, connection, peace, and healing. A person would not overthink their life so deeply if some part of them had not already decided their life matters. People who stay awake questioning everything are often people searching for truth, searching for understanding, searching for relief, searching for themselves. And sometimes the goal is not to silence every late night thought. Sometimes the goal is simply to survive the night without becoming cruel to yourself in the process. To remind yourself that exhaustion is not failure, that pain is not identity, that confusion is not permanent, and that healing is possible even for minds that feel heavy after midnight. Because one peaceful night can eventually return. One honest conversation can change a life. One moment of self-understanding can begin rebuilding a broken person quietly from the inside. And maybe tonight, instead of believing every dark thought your mind creates, you simply sit with yourself gently for a moment and remember this. You are a human being carrying experiences, not a machine designed to feel okay all the time. Some nights will hurt, some memories will return, some questions will remain unanswered for a while. But the fact that your mind is searching so deeply does not mean you are broken. It means there is still a part of you trying to heal.